Big crew for the last show of 2024, Matt Klink, Brittany Martinez, and Tim Rosales. And the big story, as it relates to a Florida congressman, you don't normally associate that with California, but Matt Gaetz' impact on Central California, Central Valley politics, and of course, the balance of power in the House of Representatives has had immense impact here. We think about Matt Gaetz' efforts to lead a resistance movement to oust the former Speaker of the House, Brittany's former boss, Kevin McCarthy, from his power and leadership in Washington, D.C. And then now, over the last few months, we've seen quite a whirlwind for Mr. Gaetz. He was to be appointed as Attorney General by President-elect Donald Trump. That did not go too well, didn't last that long as far as what the tea leaves were reading from senators who were taking a look at who he was as a candidate, not really an experienced attorney, or an appointment, not really an experienced attorney, no prosecution history, all sorts of things. And of course, the thing that Kevin McCarthy has long said for a long time is what led to his ouster, which is this release of this ethics report that had been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back about Matt Gaetz' relationship allegedly with minors in his past, in this case with one minor, and perhaps drug use as well. That report now released, and Matt Gaetz has already been removed from the House. He did that himself. He took himself out of the House of Representatives, giving Republicans a little bit less of a majority to work with. And now, of course, we see this release today. And of course, the first person I have to go to for comment on this is Brittany Martinez, who was in the Kevin McCarthy's office during when all this happened last year. I know we talked about last month when the Attorney General nomination was pulled out, but what does it look like now that this ethics report that Kevin McCarthy himself has been talking about for months has finally been released?
I think that this is an important day and again, it's a report. I want to be careful about how I discuss this, allegations, accusations. Matt Gaetz already appears to be litigious on this issue. He's already filed complaints. And so I just want to be mindful about the way that I personally talk about it, especially with my connection with my old office. But I think that it's important that we hold our congressional leaders accountable. What is discussed in this report and these accusations is absolutely despicable. He was a 35-year-old congressman, having alleged relationships with a 17-year-old. That is a child. And it is a child in the state of Florida. And so I think that is absolutely disgusting behavior. And I am glad that this report has been released. Chairman Guest of the Ethics Committee, he said that he did not vote in favor of releasing it because it was unprecedented. It hadn't happened since 2006. However, I think that there is a time to sometimes break precedent. And I think that's one of these moments. Men and women in power should not be abusing their authority, especially in this way. So I'm glad that this report has been released, and I'm sure we'll continue hearing more about it over the next few weeks.
Matt, as far as what we can expect Republicans to do in the wake of this, I mean, I imagine the idea is to drop this during what is usually going to be a slow news cycle of this part of the year, and then hope to move on and transition to be like, hey, 2025, new year, new me, or new party, new me, as far as what to look forward to. And that would also be leaving Matt Gaetz and his wing of the party as far as influence behind.
Yeah, I mean, from a crisis management perspective, it's a perfect timing to drop it. Tomorrow is going to be filled with Christmas Eve activities. We'll head into the Christmas season. Basically, now that puts you through the weekend, and next week it's going to be, oh, that's so yesterday's news. I will highlight though that Matt Gaetz is one of those unique individuals that never really had a legislative agenda. He was not a heavy lifter when it came to pushing legislation, but he was a heavy lifter when it came to publicity for Matt Gaetz. And you reap what you sow. When he ousted Kevin McCarthy, and Brittany, I know you can't talk about it or you choose not to talk about it, but when he ousted Kevin McCarthy with basically no plan beyond ousting Kevin McCarthy, that highlighted to a lot of people, Republicans, and frankly, and Democrats who cared about the just basic functionality of the House of Representatives. It highlighted a big problem with Washington, D.C., where people that are more interested in creating chaos than they are with solving problems. So for Matt Gaetz, look, he had as many Republican enemies as he did Democratic enemies. And the release of this report, what was it, William Shakespeare, who said, revenge is a dish best served cold? Happy holidays, Matt Gaetz, buddy. You reap what you sow. That's all I got to say.
Tim, as far as what you have to say on this too, I mean, maybe Republicans will make the argument that Mike Johnson is a better leader as far as the national party is concerned. I know my personal experience, I was in Wyoming when Trump was up there campaigning for Harriet Hageman, trying to oust Liz Cheney. it was advised that Kevin McCarthy not be in the building. He had a video that played at the rally instead, and he was booed into oblivion because the tapes that had been leaked of him talking about what to do in response to January 6th were being played. So maybe his reputation with the national party wasn't always great. But I know as far as the California Central Valley, and particularly his district, as far as what we may be able to get out of it, and I know how much, well, we love Vince Vaughn here, but it's still considered a bit of a loss when he is not in some sort of a leadership presence as far as actually holding office there in Washington D.C. and having the speaker's gavel.
Well, 100%. Anytime that you have a Californian of either party, Republican or Democrat, who has the speaker's gavel, that's a good thing for California. It's a good thing, particularly in this case, it was a great thing for the Central Valley as a region, an area that is traditionally underrepresented. You hear all the time, particularly in California, that all the attention goes to San Francisco, all the attention goes to Los Angeles, but very little attention is paid to the Central Valley. That's magnified, in terms of nationally, and the fact that the Central Valley is, from an energy standpoint, and also the breadbasket of not only the country but the world, really, to have a speaker who is, from the heartland of California, really, and is a great benefit, and then not to have that is a huge loss. So, again, that is. That is all in the past now, and we have to move forward as we do in politics.
And Brittany, going to you on this question as we go into this last round of Gaetz questions, what was it like working when you're under that constant pressure of having to work with Matt Gaetz? Not only him, but you can look at people like Lauren Boebert there as well, maybe other ones like Eli Crane, those couple ones from Arizona too, like Gosar and Biggs. What is it like working with that constant threat of, okay, there's a possibility I'm going to get ousted? This is a party that, as we were talking with Matt, was mentioning earlier, that maybe is not, or this wing of the party is not necessarily pushing legislation as far as pushing an idea or a narrative. How do you work and operate in that system for as long as you guys did before it was ultimately ousted? Kevin McCarthy was ultimately ousted from the speakership.
Well, I agree with Matthew, who is on this podcast with us today, in that he definitely seemed to be a firebrand that was more focused on getting a TV gig in the future, which he's now secured. We'll see if that stays in place with OANN, than actually delivering results for the American people. And well, when you ask that question, I'll speak for myself and myself only. But that first time when he went for the speaker vote, obviously it took 15 rounds. I was really proud to work for him and that team. He wasn't going to give up, and he didn't. And he did all of the right things that he was supposed to do as speaker. He reached across the aisle when he needed to, because it was a slim majority. You were never going to be able to pass overwhelming Republican initiatives when you only have a few seats. You have to work with the other side of the aisle, especially also when the Senate is Democrat right now, right? And I think he kept the government funded. He made sure that our military was funded. And because he worked with Democrats, Matt Gaetz felt that it was incumbent upon himself to oust him and that group of the hateful eight, as I like to call them, the Gaetz eight sometimes. But I'm really proud of the legacy that he left. Obviously, I'm speaking about McCarthy. I'm really proud of the legacy that McCarthy left. I'm proud to have been just a very small part of that team. And he did the right thing. And, it's really terrible what happened, and still now. And as Tim said, obviously politics moves on and we have to move forward. I think that the American people would have been better off with a Speaker McCarthy. And of course, Vince Vaughn is doing a great job for the Central Valley. But as someone who worked for McCarthy for a while, I was proud to be there till the end. And, he is a great leader. And I'll finish by saying, I think that he is one of the most politically, strategically intellectual minds when it comes to the way that we look at politics. He was able to, in his time in leadership, as the leader of House Republicans during those 5 years, double the amount of congressional Republicans from California. And now we've lost 2 of those seats since he's been gone. And so, to the point that we were talking about earlier, I think it was Tim who said it, whether it's a Speaker Pelosi or Speaker McCarthy, when you have those folks in those leadership positions, it's important for our state overall. And as a Republican, I hate to see fewer seats that are Republican House seats in California. But anyway, it was a great privilege, greatest professional privilege of my life, having been able to work for him. And, I look forward to hearing what he does with Alpha and all of those things.
Nate Monroe might not be. He's our buddy from Cape, and of course his buddy Adam Gray was elected to the House of Representatives, going in for John Duarte in what was a close race these last two times. Although he has to fill a vacancy within his department, so who knows? Maybe that job process is going to be the hiring process might be tough. He's okay with a couple more vacancies. As far as what you're looking at, Matt, we were just talking with Brittany, who really eloquently described what to expect from Kevin McCarthy and the brand and thinking that he brought in. With Matt Gaetz gone, does that really weaken some of that fringe wing of the MAGA party, or MAGA wing of the party, or in the same respect too? I mean, it's still a very slim majority in the House. I mean, this could the votes are needed one way or the other, whether you're polling from the right or you're polling from more of the central part or the centrist Republicans that are out there.
Look, with a slim majority, every member conceivably carries the one or two votes that could swing a debate one way or the other. And there are some Republicans, like a Chip Roy, for example, that are just philosophically opposed to voting for a debt limit extension under any circumstances. That's more of a philosophical argument. You may have an issue with that, but at least you know where he stands. The challenge with an ideologue like Matt Gaetz, that is really more about Matt Gaetz, is that it was always about him. You could never put a pin in where he stands on a given issue, because I think in a large part he likely didn't know until the debate was occurring. So it makes it hard to govern under any circumstances, but with a slim majority, when you have to count heads in the House of Representatives, it can be really problematic. And look, when we were playing defense because we had a Joe Biden president, that was one thing. We're going to get some really big votes coming up in the next Congress that are core elements of Donald Trump's agenda, from the tax cut extensions. We're going to have to do a debt ceiling vote very early on. And these votes are going to be really, really important for Trump's legacy. And if they get stalled in the House of Representatives before they even get to the Senate, this is where that slim majority is really going to hurt. And the Democrats will feast off of it. And it could, interestingly enough, or tragically enough, lead to a Speaker Jeffries speakership in 2026 election, and then ultimately taking power in 2027. So it's dependent upon the Republicans to unify their caucus, and Speaker Johnson has that opportunity. Again, though, what Tim said, California lost a lot of prestige when we lost Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Look, we have two junior United States senators right now. We lost a lot of prestige with Dianne Feinstein passing away. So the Golden State is going to need to really work hard to keep its luster, given that we have a lot of, some new junior members in some important roles.
And Tim, to the point that Matt was just making there, and then also the point that Brittany was making before about losing the congressional seats, in the same respect, Republicans did perform well in races that they lost, but again, you still lost, so it doesn't always help. But how do you continue that momentum of chipping back at seats that were considered strongly Democrat? Of course, I'm thinking about the seats that are up in Stockton, like the Harder-Lincoln race, and then some other ones in the Central Valley as well. And even the Duarte Gray one, where although Duarte was the office holder, that is a Democrat-leaning district. That Duarte managed to run yet another very close race, one that was decided like the last one inside of 500 votes.
Yeah, all the seats that flipped or that went, on the Democratic side, that were the kind of the toss-up seats in California, were Democratic leaning, or at least in terms of registration, Democratic majority seats. None of these were seats that were held by Republican, voter registration majorities that went the other way. And so certainly, they're tough seats to begin with. And you had some really good candidates that you knew that the votes were going to be close, and they were. I think there's a couple concerns for Republicans, not only in California, but also nationally. Nationally, certainly, we've got 2026. You have you're going to have a Republican Congress and a Republican a president, and historically that doesn't bode, the off-year election does not bode well for that party who has, ultimate power and control. So that's going to make it a little bit tougher, particularly in some of these races that we see, and that will continue to be battled for in the Central Valley. And somebody like a David Valadao, I think, is someone who is probably going to be pretty nervous about 2026. Fantastic candidate, fantastic representative, but again, with the off-year midterm elections and just the trends, he can count on a tougher battle than what he had this year. The other thing that you have to look at is projections. We're not too far off. We're 2024. You've got 2026, and then 2028, and pretty soon you're into a new census, right? Projections right now, and Matt's like pulling out his hair because he knows what I'm going to say, which is California could lose up to 4 congressional seats based on the population projections right now. Losing 4 congressional seats in California, how do they then redraw those congressional lines? And that sets up even more battles, and particularly probably incumbents and members of Congress who are in office right now, who are going to have to make some tough decisions or do battle against each other. But again, going back to the clout, right, that was talked about, we've got junior senators, we've got we lost, we don't have a speaker from either party who is from California, like we've had the luxury of having. You have now California is going to lose members of from either party in the House of Representatives, and that's bad for California. Other states are going to pick up. Texas is probably going to pick up a few. Texas might pick up 4. Utah might pick up 1. The clout of those states is going to increase in the House of Representatives, and that's something I think that should concern all Californians. Again, population's moving out, and that's how House of Representatives is decided.
When I was in Wyoming, and of course I would have to, this is another Wyoming story, but when I have to, tell people I was from California, the first thing is, oh, total blue state, you're sending all you guys out this way. I said, well, by the way, I mean, if you look at the 2020 election, Trump actually had the most votes from any state inside California. That was not true. In 2024, he had dropped off quite a bit. And one of the reasons why is because you've had a lot of people that have moved out of the state. Probably the fear of most of those people in Wyoming, but who would always tell me that. But it would be that they would go to other states, and like you said, the consequences for that are less congressional seats. And it seems to be in the past, especially in this district, with Valadao's district and with Fong's district, what ends up happening is you have these long distances and weirdly drawn out seats where you're covering several different counties. You're looking at 2 to 3 hour drives between different parts of Kern County up to Tulare and Kings County in a couple of these seats. David Valadao is someone who's based in Hanford and Kings County, but his district circles around all of Bakersfield, kind of oddly. They're just oddly drawn seats, and that's kind of what we pay as far as the consequence is concerned. Matt, would you like to express the frustrations that no one on our video was able to see? While you were pulling your hair out, as Tim was describing earlier, as you were thinking about that too?
It was kind of a mutual joke about, the elections just ended and we're already talking about, 26 I can understand because it's close, but the 28 election seems a million miles away. Yet come 2025, I think people are going to start rumblings, and you'll see politicos making trips to Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire already just to try to see if there's any traction. So, the rest of the world, having just come back from Africa, the rest of the world, they look at us with envy because our campaigns are so long, but they also look at us with disgust because our campaigns are so long. So it's a double-edged sword. But it's politics never stops.
I'll give one last Will Silverstein lore story. When I was a student at the University of Iowa and we were covering people coming in, less than 6 months after Beto O'Rourke lost his Senate race in Texas by 2%, everyone was excited for him. Guess who's in Iowa City with a big Iowa Hawkeye hat, putting it on, speaking in front of a bunch of students? He was all ready to go for 2020, after losing that election in 2018. So it is true that the candidates and the stories and the coverage will start on that area. Brittany, as far as what we can look forward to in 2025, it'll be the first year of Donald Trump's second term in office, of course, with the 4 years with Joe Biden in between. What do you think are going to be the biggest things to watch for in 2025 politically? Obviously, I think we would say it starts with these cabinet confirmations, but from that point forward, it looks on like a lot of different policy that he may want to implement from his campaign.
I think the number one and two issues he kept talking about, and the reason he won, was economy and immigration, and the fact that Biden wasn't able to do a good job on either of those issues, and those were issues that came to be extremely important to the American people. The economy is always the first issue, and immigration, the illegal border crossings and the amount of that during the Biden administration, that was a cause for alarm. And so I think those are going to be some of the top issues, and especially when we think about California as it is a border state, I think, and with the juxtaposition of Gavin Newsom, who has already started his fund to be able to, I guess, potentially sue the Trump admin, even though nothing has happened yet, and he hasn't even been sworn in yet. And so I think that when we're looking, especially at the state, those are probably going to be the issues that we'll see the most, and nationally as well. But the thing that makes it the most interesting, in my opinion, is Gavin Newsom and what he's going to do with that. And also, I'll say energy, especially for the Central Valley. Obviously, we're very much, all of the above energy sort of people in the Republican Party in the Central Valley. And having worked for McCarthy for so long, those are issues that are really important to the district and to the region. And so I think that, and Newsom wanting to sort of convert everything to be green, or at least, going in that direction. The back and forth on that, I think, is going to be something to watch out for.
Tim, are we expecting more Red County tours from Gavin Newsom in 2025 and helping people have more conversations?
Oh, you can bet on it. You can bet Gavin is going to, pull out every political trick, that he can. He's a lame duck governor. He is absolutely interested in what is happening in Washington, D.C., not very interested in what's happening or the results from his governorship in California. I think he's kind of come to the resolution that he is not going to be viewed very well necessarily by Californians, but if it comes down to a presidential race that he's in, he's certainly going to win California. It's about every place else. So that's where Governor Newsom's looking, and to be fair, you also, and I don't mean this necessarily in a negative way, but Donald Trump is a lame duck president as well. I mean, this is his last term. I mean, he can't run anymore, and so you've got, even though Republican control of the House, Republican control of the Senate, these are all individuals who have to run again. Some of them have to run in 2026. Everybody in the House does, certainly, and the Senate, some as well too. And so watching how those maybe swing seats or toss-up seats, how they vote, how they deviate from what the Trump agenda is, or where they fall in line. I do believe that the president elect is going to have to show some pretty quick wins here in 2025, and there are some wins that he can certainly get, and I think that they're planning on that. But looking at getting some of those wins and then watching to see how some of those marginal members of the House of Representatives, members of the House of Representatives who are in marginal seats, how they vote on some of those critical and key issues that Brittany talked about.
Yeah, Matt,
Will,
yeah.
I think you raised the valid question too, of like what can we expect? It's my understanding that the Trump team realizes that they lost, valuable time in 2017 when they took office because they weren't ready for the rigors of the presidency, and I think that they're ultimately going to correct that. And they have rationalized that they have really 18 months to implement the lion's share of their agenda before the politicking for the 2026 election cycle really kicks in. And I think you're going to see a lot of different things. You're going to see a number of executive orders, probably a record number of executive orders on day one or the initial week following his inauguration. The other thing that is going to be interesting, and I heard Newt Gingrich talk about this the other day, is that they need to pass the tax cut package as early as possible, primarily so that the benefits have time to be implemented and so that the voters actually see it happen. As you recall, that was a big problem that Joe Biden faced, is that for all the infrastructure spending, it took forever to get the money out, and nobody saw the benefit of it, so they didn't give the Biden administration any credit. That's what they say. The third and final thing, I think, is that what DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, has talked about, and people may laugh at it, but what you're going to see Donald Trump do is there are a number of federal agencies that are duplicative and have technically their authorization has expired. He can get rid of them. And if Congress wants them back, let Congress go back and authorize these agencies into existence again. Let's follow the law. And I think that, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have said that they want to take it from roughly 400 to 100 government agencies. If they can start hacking away at Washington, D.C., and people see that government gets smaller and service doesn't drop precipitously, which I think is pretty likely to occur, I think that the American voter will look at that very enthusiastically for 2026. That's the calculus that the Trump team's making right now.
And last questions here, and well, I have one more question after this, but for Brittany, what's the role of media in 2025? We knew what it was in 2016 through 2020, talking about Trump and his personal ambitions and whatnot, and maybe his behavior behind the scenes, and just the constant Trump coverage. Now he's been elected president. Seems like there's been a move towards different types of media other than mainstream or legacy. What role does media have in play for the first year here in this Trump presidency?
Yeah, podcasts have existed for a while now, but I think that sort of those podcasts that are Joe Rogan, sort of long form, talking about a plethora of topics, Call Her Daddy, right? That's not a political podcast, but Vice President Harris was on it, and those sorts of things. I think we're going to see a lot of politicians trying to get on those types of podcasts. Those are the top 1 and 2 in the world, so that they're going to have a hard time. But there's a lot of other types of podcasts that exist. I think that there is a lot of distrust with the mainstream media. Though I work with reporters all the time, and I understand how important they are to sharing what is happening in the world, and perhaps there's bias, but I think that there are a lot of good, hardworking journalists who have journalistic integrity, and I think a lot of folks are going to be turning to local news. So that is great for eyewitness news here and being able to tune in and watch you on their screens. And I think that social media continue, like YouTube, that's sort of what, especially the younger people, that's what they're kind of trending towards. That's what they're paying attention to. And so that would sort of be my prediction of what media looks like going forward.
And Tim and I have jumped on this train a number of times talking about Gavin Newsom and oil and recent regulations and whatnot over the last couple of months. I have not heard anything from Matt yet in response to his lashing outs, Newsom's at reporters recently, including one of our sister stations, about new regulations that are going into effect and about how he's expecting to see gas prices fall, which they have, but that does happen every year when the winter blend kicks in. Not too big of a surprise. Matt, anything that you wanted to say that I haven't been able to hear from you in these last couple months?
Well, Gavin Newsom claiming credit for market fluctuations in gasoline prices is like the rooster claiming credit for the sunrise. I think that what the ultimate problem that Gavin Newsom faces or he faces two big problems. One is that we need oil. It's not going anywhere. And as much as, Gavin and his proclamations about California is going to be weaned off of gasoline, it physically cannot happen with the way that the economy is set up. Now, the downside about that, though, is that we also have lost at least one more refinery in the state, and potentially we could lose another one. And we are now importing oil from places around the world that, one, are not democratic, and two, their oil is dirtier than ours, and three, we have it under the ground in our own state. So, again, Gavin is a zealot when it comes to this issue. He doesn't care that people in the Central Valley and those people that have to commute a long way to work every day and sweat for a living can't afford to buy their fancy schmancy electric cars. And you know what? That may work for him right now in California, where the coastal elites control the vote. It's not going to be a robust platform for him on the national stage. And that's why you're seeing him try to go around and suck up to all the Central Valley electorate that really pretty resoundingly rejected him and his agenda. So,
Tim, final thoughts?
I can't say it any better than Matt did. in terms of Governor Newsom. But I will say, going back to, I think the point on the media is that I do think, and Brittany mentioned it, which is over the next year or two, the media is really going to have to, I think, earn the trust of the viewers, the readers back. Because I think they made a pretty clear statement in this last election in terms of kind of what their trust level was, and we do see some, movement on that. We see it at the Los Angeles Times with Patrick, Shun-Chong, who the owner of the LA Times, completely gutting the editorial board. I mean, I think all three of us here have probably pitched dozens of pieces to the LA Times editorial board. And if any of us have a success story on that, I'd be surprised. Probably Brittany does, and Matt, I haven't had no success with that. Because they've just been absolutely so one-sided. And so to see some fairness, it doesn't even have to be skewing to the right. Just give me a center. And we would absolutely be happy with some of those editorial decisions with these publications. So I think that was a great question, and I think that's going to be a big key for 2020, 25, 26 cycle, and how people digest and respond to news.
You know what, Tim, you're right. News media, adapt or die. You got to change. People are consuming news differently, and there's not three main stations that 90% of Americans get their news. Brittany, you talked about podcasts. It's a more diffuse environment, and that's why this podcast that you do, you're cutting edge, dude. You're right up. This is what people want, and this is how they want to consume their news. So
Yep.
I'm honored that you have included me on these podcasts, and it's always fun to appear with Brittany and Tim. So thank you for having me, and keep up the good work, Will. We need you.
Appreciate your guys' time as always. Always love working with you guys, and have a happy New Year if we don't talk to you before then.
You got
Merry
it.
Christmas, Happy New
Thanks,
Year.
everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.